Okay, so let's take a deep breath and start. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rump session of LessWrong and Slate Star Codex. I gave it both brand names because I think that we're basically the same population groups, although maybe not. But we're here to have fun. That's why we're here this evening. And my name is Joshua Fox. I help organize LessWrong and sometimes Slate Star Codex in Israel. And today we're doing it online, which is wonderful because we have people from all over the world. Maybe afterwards we can have more of these. So I really like for the speaker. In a moment, we'll introduce ourselves. And after that, we'll give short talks. And I'll explain how the short talks work. But you know what? I'll explain 10 seconds of how they work. And then after we introduce ourselves, I'll take another 3 minutes to explain how they work. What it will be is anyone can volunteer to give a talk of 4 minutes, and then everyone votes. And I have a voting tool here, so we can vote. If more than half vote for it to go ahead, the person can have another 3 minutes, it's optional. But first, let's please continue without me. Yes, you can continue without me. Somebody asks how we will vote. There is an on-screen voting tool, which I will trigger. Any last questions before we start? So I'm just zipping through here to see who gave a suggestion of who to talk, of like giving a talk. And let's start with Vanessa. So Vanessa, could you please unmute and start? And also Patrick and anyone else, please time. So go right ahead, Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. So my talk is going to be about how to Dutch book a Bayesian. And by
I think I've lost you, Vanessa.
Oh, you can't hear me.
Oh, now I can hear you. Yes, I hear you.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to Dutch book a Bayesian. And basically, Dutch booking is a concept that's often used in decision theory, often in order to justify Bayesianism. And the idea of Dutch booking is creating some situation in which if you do not behave according to a certain principle...
Sorry for interrupting, but can I ask who is speaking that I have to find their face?
It's Vanessa.
Vanessa is speaking?
Yeah, please don't interrupt. Yeah, Vanessa, please go ahead.
So, yeah. So Dutch booking means doing something that will cheat an arbitrary amount of money out of someone, exploiting this someone's irrationality. For example, if someone has non-transitive preferences, then like there's someone who prefers B instead of A, C instead of B, and A instead of C, then you can exploit them by offering them money to change from option A to option B, from B to C, and from C to A, and they will pay you an infinite amount of money. So this is an example of Dutch booking. How do you Dutch book an agent that is Bayesian? Because Bayesianism is supposed to be the gold standard of rationality. So ostensibly it's supposed to be impossible, but actually it is possible. The way it works is as follows. First of all, if I'm a Bayesian agent, then I can always act deterministically. There's no reason for me to ever do something random because there is always a deterministic bias optimal policy. The second observation is that for a Bayesian agent, it's rational to always accept one side of a bet. If someone offers me to make a bet and I can choose whichever side I want, then from the point of view of Bayesian decision theory, it's rational to always accept. Now, given these two assumptions, imagine that we have an agent called omega that can predict everything I will ever do. Because omega is really smart, right? And omega knows a lot of things that I don't know. Then what omega can do is find a list of questions such that those questions can be offered to me as bets, and I will always choose the wrong side. Right, so I'm a rational agent. I'm choosing the side of some side of any bet according to what I know, right? According to my expected utility with respect to my belief state. But sometimes I will make mistakes. Even a perfectly rational agent doesn't know everything, so they can make mistakes. But the trick here is that omega will choose only those bets in which omega knows I'm going to make a mistake, because omega knows which side of the bet I'm going to choose, and omega knows the real answer, or at least omega knows the real answer better than me. In this way, I, as a Bayesian agent, am going to accept this entire series of bets, and I'm going to keep losing money all the time. And despite the fact that I keep losing money, I cannot stop doing this because this is what my Bayesian decision theory tells me to do. So Bayesian agents get Dutch booked. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa, and thank you for that 4-minute presentation. I know your time was short, but that's good. We have to learn to talk fast, so not fast, but briefly. Now I'm going to launch a poll. Ready, steady, relaunch poll. And everybody please vote. Should Vanessa get another 3 minutes? Okay, voting. Give it another, 20 seconds to vote. Oh, I see lots of people are voting. Remember, don't be too eager to say yes, but don't be too eager to say no either. Both are fine. And we have plenty of time. Okay. Yeah, so I see that a lot of people have voted, and that's been about 20 seconds. So now I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results. Okay, so thank you, Vanessa. So Phil, could you go ahead and give your presentation?
Sure. So I'm specifically talking about cattle ranchers in Shasta County, Northern California in like the 1980s, according to a book called Order Without Law, which I read about half of a few years ago. So caveat, I might be forgetting what I'm saying, but let's give it a go. So in Shasta County, there are land can be designated in two ways for ranching. It can be open range or closed range. And the cattle ranchers care deeply about which range it is. Like they strongly prefer range to be open. And the reason they give for this is that if a motorist runs into a cow in open range, then they will put it as the motorist buys the cow, as in like the cow has a right to be there because it's open range, and so if you hit the cow, that's your fault. Whereas in closed range, if the motorist hits the cow is not allowed to be there, and so the rancher is at fault, and the rancher, according to them, has to essentially buy the vehicle. That's the reason they give. This is entirely 100% false. There is Like the law simply does not make that distinction. The distinction that the law actually makes is that in open range, in closed range, you are responsible for fencing in your cattle. And so in closed range, if your cattle go to land that they don't have, and you don't have right to graze your cattle on, then you are at fault for any damages they do. Whereas in open range, if it's the responsibility of the landowner to fence your cattle out. So the difference is, do you fence your cattle in, or does someone else fence your cattle out? But interestingly, so the reason that the ranchers give for caring about the distinction is a false reason. The actual reason, the actual legal reason that one might care about this is a thing that the ranchers pay no attention to at all. Their social norms for dealing with cattle violations are exactly the same in either situation. So what they'll do, basically they have codes of neighborliness, where if your cattle eats some of someone else's feed, then usually your neighbor just will not bother you about it. Like they will call you and say, hey, your cattle is on my land, please come and collect it. But they're not going to make a fuss. If you habitually do it, then they might start getting a bit annoyed, but they're not going to bring in the law still. They're going to start gossiping about you, or they're going to, maybe if it gets really bad, they're going to take your cow and drive it to somewhere remote that's annoying for you to pick it up. But generally speaking, people just treat each other fairly, according to their, you don't eat someone else's, you don't let your cattle stray, but if someone else's cattle do stray, it's not a big deal. They basically expect that, because it's basically impossible to keep a cattle fenced in. Am I out of time?
Yes, and first of all, thank you. So just an explanation of how we usually do it when it's face-to-face is that at the end of 4 minutes, everybody claps loudly, regardless of whether you're in the middle of a sentence or not. Now, I don't think we can do that but everybody can say whatever. Everybody can clap. There's actually a reaction tool on your Zoom, which you can see, you can clap. Yes, if you clap, it shows your video, a clap on top of your video of your face. So everybody should feel very happy to clap and to thumbs up, because that's your way of, besides the chat, that's the way of interacting as we go. So would you like another 3 minutes?
I don't really know that I have any more to say.
Okay, that's fine too. So thank you very much, and appreciate that. And I do want to ask you, Phil, as a person who just spoke, would you prefer if I said 1 minute, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds? Would that help you?
It probably would have just been a bit distracting in my case. I forgot to still have the chat visible, so I didn't see.
Yeah,
that would probably work better.
Okay, of course that's hard to do. So anyway, thank you. And Connor, you're up. And everybody else, please mute.
So everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So a bit more lighthearted talk. I'm going to tell you how to become an amazing Dungeons & Dragons player in 4 minutes. 3, 2, 1, let's go. So the talk won't make super much sense for people who've never played a role-playing game before. To explain really shortly what it is a game involving role-playing. Okay, let's move on. So the central problem of RPGs, every game you've ever played, Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, every single game you've ever played have one huge problem. That problem is that they are not actually games. What do I mean by this? Take a step back. RP is art. What I mean, I stand by this statement. It's art the same way as writing a book is art, the same way as acting a play is art. Art has no rules, something I also stand by. If you want to make a bizarre, grimdark, Thomas the Tank Engine erotic fan fiction, I won't stop you. Don't show it to me. I don't want to see it, but you can do it. You have no responsibility towards other people, what you can create or what you can't create. But pen and paper is different. Role-playing games are different because you do have a responsibility towards the people you're playing with. They have to have fun too, not just you. Games work because they have rules. A game without a rule is not a game. And the overwhelming majority of RPG rule sets aren't actually rules, they're tool sets. You can create a game with them, but they aren't actually games. Imagine you and your friends decide to play cards. One starts playing poker, second one go fish, and so on. No one's going to be happy. No one will get the game they want. But you're all playing cards, right? The problem is communication. How can we all agree to work on whatever it is we want? There's a pathological lack of awareness of vocabulary generally among people. Like, no one even knows how to put into words when they run into problems like this. So what do we do about this? There's, of course, no general solution. It would be a general solution to social problems, which would be great, but we don't have one. There are ways to mitigate and preempt these problems. So whenever you are considering, playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, whether it's your first time or your 10th group, there's some things to keep in mind. So here's Connor's guide to how to be an amazing RPGer. Step number 1, know what you want. Step number 2, communicate what you want. And step number 0, accept that not everyone will want what you want. You have a responsibility with a player or a game master, whatever you do, as long as you play a game with other people, and this applies not just to role-playing games, is at least in part your responsibility to ensure other people are having fun. And the same applies to everyone else. Whatever you want, that's fine, but everything has a time and place. Be as respecting of other people's wishes as they should be of yours. There's no such thing as playing wrong, only playing different. There's a big caveat, unfortunately. No one knows what they want, including you. That means you'll have to try some things out. You won't like some of it. You need to be aware of that. Know when to leave respectfully. It's fine if you don't enjoy a group. If you play a game, you say, that's not for me, it's fine. Just say so. Don't be rude about it and leave. So the cure is vision, communication, agreement. And not being a dick helps too. So boom, you're one of the best RP gamers in the world. When do you want to set up a game?
1 minute.
I am done unless you want to hear more tips.
No, you have another minute. Go ahead.
Okay. Rapid fire tips. I played a lot of pen and paper in my life. Remember, all those warnings on chemicals were at some point found out the hard way. So take my advice. Tips for everyone. Number 1, players and game master are not working against each other. You're working together to create a fun story. Number 2, good RP and paper takes time. This applies doubly if you play over text. Plan at least 4 hours per session. Tip number 3, get a real set of dice. It's very satisfying. And tip number 4, don't try to cram everything into the first game you play. You'll have enough time to play other things. If you keep just these minor things in mind when you are playing your first game, when you just relax, because that is the final tip I'm going to give with you. Relax. It's just you and your friends. You're just being goofy. You don't have to be a great artist. You don't have to be an author. It's going to be fun.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Everybody clap. Yes, don't forget your claps. Okay, so now would you like another 3 minutes?
If I do another 3 minutes, it would be another rapid fire tips for people. I don't know how many people even play pen and paper games.
No,
so
let's go. I mean, this is how it works. So we're going to do this. I'm going to relaunch the poll. And I'm going to launch the poll. Yes, everybody will see a poll. Please vote for either another 3 minutes, yes or no. And give that about 20 seconds of voting. Okay, we got 42 votes, 43, 44. Oh, it is so close, so close, so close, so close. 46 voters, give it another 5 seconds. Of course, I'm seeing the live votes here. Okay, I'm the only one who sees the polls right now, but now I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share it. And as you see, you get another 3 minutes, so go for it, please, Connor.
All right. Okay. Let me try to improvise. Okay. One of the first things I give up people, this is kind of tangentially related, is on creativity. Is a lot of people, when they say they want to play Dungeons and Dragons, one of the things that's in the way, especially if they want to do a game master, is that they say they're not creative enough. They can't think of stories. There is no simple answer. Life experience is the fuel of creativity. The only thing you can do that might make you more creative is to have more life experience, which is rich, what does that mean? But inspiration can come from literally anywhere. My current D&D campaign is a cyberpunk-inspired fantasy setting filled with AI alignment and economics. It's great. But who would have thought that the ideas would come from there? Another important thing is there's no such thing as originality. Steal everything, but not unmodified. Steal, don't copy. That's the rule of art. There's one of my favorite sayings from the great American author, Ernest Hemingway, who wrote many of the great classics, is the first draft of anything is shit. He really said that, by the way. That is something you should always take in heart. When you look at your first story, you're going to hate it. When you play your first game, you're going to hate it. Or maybe not. Maybe it's fun because you're just hanging out with your friends. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. It doubly doesn't matter when you're playing a role-playing game because, again, it's you and your friends. No one cares if you suck. And you'll get better. It doesn't matter. Another important thing is the difference between inspiration and perspiration. A thing I've seen with a lot of people that try to do various creative things, again, not just role-playing games, is that they wait for inspiration. You know, I can't play this week. Have to have the inspiration to strike. If you always wait for the inspiration to strike, you'll never get anything done. Art is to a huge degree a learnable craft like any other. Now, some people might say, okay, what about Mozart? You know, he could play the piano at 10 years old and whatever. Yeah, took him 10 years. So it is practice. To a huge degree, any kind of art is practice. It's a craft. The more you do it, the better you get. So the most important thing you can do to become a better artist in any way is to do it. Finally, as two more things of creativity, find a balance between novelty and what is known to work. There's a good reason all pen and paper games usually are sword and sorcery fighting action games because it's simple and it's fun. So maybe don't start with a political intrigue. It can be difficult to write in your experience. Finally, here's an exercise for at home. After consuming a piece of art, say a movie, book, anything, ask yourself, did I like this? Why did I not? Which elements worked? Which didn't? What could have been done to make it better? You just get in the habit of asking yourself that question after every time you read a book, every time you watch a movie. That's I personally think is the best exercise you can do to make yourself more creative and a better artist. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Everybody can clap using the button at the bottom of their screen if you want. If you want to get involved. Now I'm going to do this. I'm going to mute all. Of course, the person who speaks can unmute themselves. So thank you very much. And who is up next? I've been telling people in chat on the exact order. So who is after Connor?
I think that's me.
Well, thank you, David. So yeah, David, take it away.
Okay, so most people who are familiar with LessWrong and or Slate Star Codex understand that there's such a thing as uncertainty. You might not know what's going to happen. That's fine. We live with that. We update. We sometimes even seek new information to try and figure out what is going to happen so that we can make better decisions, which is why there's a really interesting and important difference between two types of uncertainty that kind of philosophers of probability have discussed. And that is, there's aleatory uncertainty and epistemic uncertainty. Aleatory comes from a Greek word meaning something like dice. The better example, I think, is if you're looking at a clump of, say, uranium atoms, and you want to know which one's going to decay next. There's very little you can do to find out which one it's going to be. In fact, there's kind of nothing you can do. There's no new information you can get. There's no way you can figure something out. Dice are kind of like this. If somebody rolls a die and wants to know what's going to come next, if you want to bet, the odds are going to be about 1 in 6 that you get a 3, say, even if you're really smart. Now, maybe we can do slightly better. Maybe you can have a video camera watching the die, or a machine learning algorithm that's watched the person roll the die a bunch of times and has found patterns, or even takes a picture of it and knows what its exact momentum and angle is and knows the environment and you figure it out. Maybe there's something you can do to figure out exactly where the dice is going to land. So the question is there really in practice such a thing as aleatory uncertainty? Like, is that really a thing? Or is it just that some information is really, really expensive, so it's not worth it? And this is really important because we care about things like the long-term future. We want to know whether, I don't know, solving global poverty is going to matter in, say, 500 years, or whether we should be spending our time doing something different. And this is deeply uncertain. We have very little understanding of what it is that's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years or 100 years. And the question is there any reason to spend time getting better at that? We have super forecasters. They're good at guessing what's going to happen over relatively short time periods. But we want to know whether you can do better. The second thing that I think is worth mentioning about this is that there's a big difference between aleatory uncertainty that you know is aleatory and uncertainty that you don't realize is aleatory. So if you think that predicting the weather a month from now is just a question of like, maybe if I tweak my computer model a little bit better, it'll be able to predict the weather a month out instead of only like a week and a half out. And it turns out that it's a chaotic system, and unless you can actually model the whole thing, like, you know, atom by atom, there are some pretty good guarantees that you can't do much better, that things start falling apart due to like really basic types of uncertainty. So there's kind of an important question: do you know whether you should be looking for more information or not? And I think that's my time.
All right, thank you. Would you like another 3 minutes?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, that's fine.
Hope everybody enjoyed.
Thank you. I do want to ask you too, though, as a speaker, would it have helped if I had said out loud, you know, 1 minute, 30 seconds left, that sort of thing?
No, I have the chat up. It's really easy to glance over there.
Okay, good. So I won't do that. All right. Well, thank you, David. Now, who is up next? I've been asking people in private chat. So who is after? Let's see. Benjamin. Benjamin is up next.
Hi. All right. I'm going to talk about the Dojima Rice Exchange, which was probably what the world's first securities exchange, as perhaps as we know it today, even though it was in a 17th, 18th century Japan on the island of Dojima in near Osaka. So the thing to realize about Japan at that time period was that the main unit of currency, or at least unit of account, was in fact rice. Yes, there were coins, there were gold coins, silver coins, etc. But taxes and so forth were denominated in rice. There was a unit called a koku. One koku, about 150 kilograms of rice, was meant to be enough rice to feed one man for a year. So if things are denominated in rice, if money is rice, that is, it's not only the farmers who want to securitize and hedge and so forth their rice crops. It's everyone who's got money. So, and once rice was securitized, then people did not need to haul around rice with them. They could, well, as money, they could use these rice receipts, which after all represented rice or rice futures. So Dojima would be very familiar to you if you know how modern securities exchanges work. They had many of the features which are in modern exchanges. They had a book. They had an auction book with which you place bids. They had standardized terms. They trade in units of 100 koku. Most importantly, they had market makers. That is, the people who would buy and sell who buy and sell from everyone at the market price plus little commission to give liquidity. But it was also there were also some things which are a bit different from how we conduct securities trading today. So the most interesting thing is the fire wick system. At the beginning of the trading day, they'd light a wick. They'd light a wick on fire and let it burn through. When the wick burnt out at the end of the day, that was it. Trading stops. Trading lasts just as long as the wick is burning. And then the closing price of rice at the end of the day would be considered the price of the trade which was going on just as the wick burnt out. If the wick burnt out...
please unshare screen, whoever. Donald, please stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
Go on, Benjamin.
If there was no trades going on just as the wick burnt out, or if the wick went out early, such as by rain or any reason, then the entire day's worth of trades would be cancelled, would be considered null and void. this is really, really weird. This is just simply a very weird thing that we wouldn't normally consider having as a feature, but this was actually what they considered a very important feature of their stock exchange, of their rice exchange. This is from this firewick system. This is if someone was trying to what you might call manipulate the market, if someone was dumping rice or cornering the rice market, what people could do collectively in response is, of course, stop trading. No one wants to trade when someone's manipulating the market. But what it would mean if everyone stops trading is that there's no closing price. The wick burns out, and that's it. And the entire day gets voided. This actually apparently worked quite effectively to prevent market manipulation and the like. Although, of course, there were also some fairly wacky consequences, like one famous incident in which a man rode in on horseback to disrupt trading just as it was finishing in order to void the trades for the day. If people tried to trade after the wick went out, they'd have water poured on their heads. There'd be bucket men with buckets full of water to dump on their heads.
Benjamin.
Oh, what, am I done?
Yes, I have to clap by myself. If it was live, we'd all clap out loud. Thank you, Benjamin. Would you like another 3 minutes?
Well, I've got a lot to say, but I don't know.
All right, let's go for it. I'm going to do this. Relaunch the poll. I'm launching the poll. So we have a few. Okay, everybody, please vote yes or no for another 3 minutes. Don't be too eager to vote yes. Don't be too eager to vote no. Roughly speaking, it should turn out to about half and half. It's okay if it doesn't too. All right, so I see that I'm the only one who's seeing here that the votes are coming in. 42 people voted, 43 people voted. Usually about 46 people end up voting. Okay, I see about 43 people, which is usually about the number of people who vote. Okay, and I'm now going to end the poll and I'm going to share it. Yes, okay, well, Benjamin, please go ahead. Please go ahead with another 3 minutes.
Yes. So if you were anyone who was when the wick finally burnt out, the bucket men with buckets of water would toss it on the crowd in order to disperse the crowd and stop the trading. That is a humorous part of that. Anyway, there's plenty of stories of how the people would try to fan the wick to make it burn faster, and if they wanted the trading to end sooner, or to extinguish the flame in many ways. And this rice market lasted for a few hundred years, but was closed down in the Meiji Restoration when a lot of things in Japan changed. Instead of talking about the rice exchange itself, and there's plenty of interesting things to say about it, I'll just spend a moment to note how I came to research this. I came across really a mention of it, really no more than a mention of it, and when I was in Japan a few weeks ago, I tracked it down on the internet. I ended up on Gwern's website. Of course, everything's on Gwern's website. Found some PDF which Gwern was hosting of some article which he found, and anyway, that's and it's that's what I have to say. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm going to mute all. Of course, the speaker will unmute. Okay.
So
thank you, Moshe. And Ayala, you're up next.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. Hold on, I gotta see myself so I can see what I'm doing. We're gonna learn how to dance. I can tell you guys are all chomping at the bit. I can tell you're all hyped and ready to go. So we're gonna learn how to do the Charleston. If you all can follow along with me, I expect 100% participation. Okay, I can't really see my screen that well, which is going to make this a little hard. Can you see my feet?
Yes.
Okay. So the Charleston is very simple. It's like this dance, you know, like the 20s deal. And it looks very complicated, but actually it's extremely simple. So the first step then, you basically, it's a repeating pattern. Your right foot is like slightly behind your left foot, like this. And all you do is kind of swing it out, touch in front of you, and swing it back. Then you shift your weight to your right foot, and then you take your left foot, touch back, and then come back. Basically like that. Okay. So, very simple. Right foot forward, touch the ground, step back, left foot back, and then right foot forward. And that's basically it. You're doing kind of a really lame version of the Charleston. But try and like go down at this rate. So down and down and down. I wish I could see what you guys are doing so I could respond in kind. And so basically this is kind of some sense of like you need to have the experience of like the flow in it. And then as you do this, you can try and like let your foot fling. It's like you're flinging your feet at the ground. So you go ha, and then ha ha. You see this sort of movement, how my knee is like getting flung? Because the ground catches my toe and it pulls my heel in. So like this. And then if you start jumping, it takes some practice. It's sort of like a resonant frequency kind of deal where you gotta like feel your feet do this thing. But basically it's super simple, which means you can practice it on your own. Left foot back, right foot forward. Left foot back, right foot forward. Does that make sense? Any questions? It's a pretty goofy dance. It's one of the goofier dances that exists, which is saying quite a lot. Yeah, and so mainly the trouble with this one is that you just kind of have to like, it's not really like a clinical thinking kind of dance style. There's lots of types of moves, which are ones which you can like basically follow the exact instructions and you're executing it. Like a lot of like the arm stuff, like you could probably do this, there's no intuition feeling with it. But with the Charleston, it is very intuitive. So you kind of just have to like throw yourself at the instructions until your body starts like figuring it out on its own. And that is my lesson. I think I'm done. I sick bonus moves. If you want to do a bonus, we could teach you the arm thing. It's actually quite easy.
Thank you. Would you like another 3 minutes? I'm not sure, your minute is not up, but we'd like some more time.
If you want to learn the arm thing, we can do that for another 3 minutes. If people feel like it, yeah.
Oh, that's what we will ask, if people feel like it. So please go ahead, everybody, and vote. So go ahead and vote. I see here that people are voting. 39 people, 40 people have voted. And 41 people, usually about, 60 people, okay. I mean, 60 people in the meeting. And 41 voted, which is usually about the number. Okay, so I'm going to call that closed, and I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results. And we see we have a tremendous call.
I'm glad to know your guys' priorities are in order here. Okay.
So yes, please do.
We're going to do sick arm moves. That's a technical term for this like sort of like snake thing that we got keep going here. So it's basically not intuitive at all. All you have to do is follow along and then you will be perfect at doing this. So you basically hold our arm like this, kind of loose, no, not really that many muscles tense, just holding it out. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna raise the shoulder like this. Okay, pretty easy to practice. Most of your arms should kind of stay in place like that. Now you're gonna raise your shoulder and then you're gonna rotate the elbow up like that. Right. So the shoulder is in place and the wrist is in place and you're just rotating the elbow upwards. So you're gonna look kind of like that. So we're gonna do this again. So ready, shoulder, elbow. Not bad. You guys, it looks pretty good here. And then you're gonna push your wrist out. So like that. Right? So ready? Again, shoulder, elbow rotate, wrist out. And then all you're gonna do is relax back into the original position. That's it. That is the whole freaking thing. And so all you do is just sit in front of a mirror over and over and then just repeat those moves until it starts to feel like kind of natural. So shoulder, elbow, wrist, relax. Shoulder, elbow, wrist, relax. Shoulder, elbow, wrist, relax. And shoulder, elbow, wrist, relax. There you go. That's all you're doing. And then you can like, you know, do it on both sides. And you look like a snake charmer. It should make your arm hurt. If your arm's not hurting, you're obviously not doing it right. Which is a philosophy I use for a lot of things. Okay, I'm done now. Thank you very much for trying weird body moves with me.
Okay, well, thank you. Great, great. So who is up next? Donald, you are up next, please.
Hello. So I'd like, is anyone seeing me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to talk about deconfusion. Miri has this notion of deconfusion, which they say they're trying to do for a lot of their AI things. And before we had formal calculus, when people were talking about intuitive notions of, you know, infinitesimally tiny things, but hadn't got the full epsilon and delta, it was still, you know, a bit confused, a bit formal, a bit informal, a bit, you know, when I see it. And then people came along with the epsilons and deltas, and it was a fully well understood deconfused notion, but that you could, you know, deal with rigorously. And that's apparently what Miri is trying to do. Take your intuitive understandings of things and turn them into something that is fully formal, fully mathematical, and fully, well, rigorous. I mean, before Cantor, the understanding of infinity was pretty blooming confused. But the question was, you know, why was there any understanding there at all? Before we had a piece of formal mathematics, where was the informal understanding coming from? Because the informal understanding was bad, but it wasn't like totally random. There was bits of truth here and there in it. I mean, for stuff like heat flow, the truth can come from just curve fitting large amounts of observed data. But for infinity, humans don't have any real world experience of infinity. And yet, even before we were dealing with formal maths, it was somewhat right. So there was a description of intuition as people do maths in practice, where, you know, first people do the formal maths, and then they come up with an intuitive idea of what formal maths works, and then they use multiple different bits of intuition and put them together, and then they put another layer of intuitive. So it's, you know, the same way that AlphaGo was repeatedly take an intuitive approximation of a whole bunch of bits together, we do the same sort of thing with maths. There's the low-level formal rules, and by repeatedly taking an intuitive approximation and combining several different calls to the intuitive approximation to make a better box set, we can get pretty good predictors of high-level mathematical facts, which, you know, we only boil down to the purely formal statements when we need to absolutely double-check our work. And I think what's going on in purely intuitionistic notions is that we've got that intuition structure there, but it's just not got a base case. For any particular question you pick, you can split that apart into several smaller questions, answer each of those questions with your intuition, and then update your to get an answer to the big question, and then update your intuition to get a better answer to the small questions. So that's a process that will produce, well, a fixed point of intuition. And because your intuitions are also shaped by other real world experience and data, that real world experience and data can go in and shape to the extent that it's relevant. And this means, this is why our intuitions are of things that we've not fully formalized or fully understood are often not too bad.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, clap. So would you like another 3 minutes?
I think I could. Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, so I'm going to do this. Relaunch the poll. And now everybody can vote. I'm voting. In my other persona, I'm voting. Okay, I see that 20 people have voted. 26, 28, 30. 33 people have voted. Fewer people have voted than otherwise, but that's okay. Hang on. Somebody is not mute. I just muted everybody. Okay, anyway, now I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So thank you, Donald. And we're going to move on to the next speaker. Who is the next speaker?
I think that's probably me, right?
Okay.
I'm Gabrielle, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Gabrielle,
please
yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, and you started time?
Please go ahead, yes.
So I am a PhD student in mechanical engineering department at University of Colorado Boulder, and we make soft robotic components. So the traditional view, I want to emphasize, like, this is a community very much in, sort of knowing a lot about the software engineering side of things. I do not work on any software, but the traditional view of robots, especially in the public's mind, is like a heavy metal, rigid, very limited item. Limited in the number of tasks that it can perform. You might have like your industrial capability, sort of assembly line type of robots, but you don't want them to interact with people because they're hard. If a robot meets a person like that, right, there's no give. The person is not going to win that encounter. So what a lot of recent work in robotics has been in is in soft components that can interact with people. And that would not only to interact with people, but also to explore novel environments where you're worried that like a rigid robot might not be able to conform to an interesting new environment the way that a soft robot could. Imagine like a cave exploration robot, for search and rescue missions or just for mapping out caves. That's a really big thing right now, that you want these robots to be able to like get into narrow crevices and tunnels. And what we see in nature is that the way nature solves this problem is by making a lot of things soft and squishy. Like octopuses can, fit into super narrow gaps, and elephants can like curl their trunks around all kinds of objects. And so that's really, really cool, right? So what my lab works on, and it's easy to find us online if you're curious about seeing the demos that I could not bring any demos home with me, of course. Keplinger Research Group at Colorado. So what we work on is the soft capacitors, that the basic principle of a capacitor, if you guys don't know yet, is that one side is positive charge, one side is ground, and that will like store some charge to be used later. So what we do is we just make those capacitors out of a plastic bag full of oil. So it's like a little tiny pillow. We usually use like 3 centimeter by 3 centimeter plastic pillow full of oil. And those electrodes, one on, positive charge, negative charge, will zip together. But the electrode doesn't cover the entire surface of the plastic. So basically, I did this little diagram. If this is the shape in side view, if this is a cross-sectional view of the capacitor, then when those electrodes are attracted to each other, it pushes the oil to the other side of the capacitor. So you have one side zipping like that and one side expanding. And so you get linear motion out of this, you know, not two-dimensional shape, but out of an originally flat thing. So yes, rigid robots are definitely better at some things. And I think in, you know, soft robotics are not intended to replace hard robotics. Hard robots are still generally like very fast and very efficient. But soft robots would just be filling a niche that isn't currently filled by hard robots. Yes, thank you, David, for finding the actual correct URL. So there are, you know, we do work with combining hard and soft robotic components, but since hard robots are very, very well understood, we do work more in characterizing only the soft components right now. And so those, you know, those have the capacity to be actually part of like home help systems, interacting with people, lots of areas where you wouldn't want a hard robot to be for the safety of the people it's interacting with.
All right. Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you. Would you like another 3 minutes?
Sure. If I had another 3 minutes, I could talk more specifically about my own project, like what I'm specifically working on, an example.
So I'm launching the poll. Everybody can vote now. And let's see, people are voting. So far, 32 people have voted. 33, 34. 35 people have voted. Okay, well, that's probably about who's going to vote. So I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results. And we can all see. So great. 95% would love to hear some more. So please go ahead.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So just first to answer the commercial usability question in the chat. How far are the systems from being commercially usable? So my advisor and his first generation of students actually have already set up a company that have put these in, these are called Hazels, into commercial use, and they have some orders. This is a startup, very small right now, but they do have commercial orders in order to produce Hazels for various components in sort of, you know, companies that don't specialize in this. Soft robotics is a broader field, has a ton of commercial applicability already. So one of the reasons we're working with Hazels is because they can be untethered. You don't have to keep them connected to a giant air tank, but pneumatic robots powered by air that you do keep connected to a giant air tank are actually already in use in industry for pick and place systems, like on a conveyor belt, you know? So if you look up Soft Robotics Inc., it's probably just Soft Robotics Inc., like inc.com, you'll see some examples of pneumatic robots that are already in industrial use. And so I am working on a gripper right now, which is one of the things that soft robotics is actually already pretty good at. But like I said, we would like to make our robots untethered completely. So the electronics packages for these soft robots, for the capacitor style robots, can be like pocket sized. One of my research group members has already like made fit in your pocket electronics quite literally. So that's a really cool aspect of this. And I'm working on a continuum gripper. So you stack a bunch of Hazels. Like I said, this is what's called a Hazel. You stack a bunch of those, and you can imagine how if all of the bubbles are on the same end, you get a continuum curl, right? So the way that your finger works. And that would be, you know, one finger of a 3 or 4 pronged gripper. And that gripper would ideally be able to pick up soft, delicate objects that are not very, that would get crushed if a hard robot were to interact with them, like raspberries and raw eggs and stuff like that. And what's cool about Hazels is that because there's a solid physical law in place for calculating capacitance from the thickness of your capacitor, the Hazels are actually self-sensing. If any oil gets pushed back into the electrode area, then you can know that there's a contact. And so there's a really excellent just way that you set up a self-sensing system. I'm sorry, you set up a little circuit into your system, and the Hazels like know what they're supposed know that they've come into contact with something and they should stop applying pressure. So grippers are really, really promising in this.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. Okay, now who is next? I see that Aleatory is next. So please speak up.
Okay, hi everyone. So I think lithium-ion batteries are a pretty cool technology that we have in our phones, in our computers, in driving in our cars in the near future, I hope. So I kind of made this diagram to try and describe it. I will see how this works. So when we have a lithium ion, essentially it's a lithium atom. It has a positive electrical charge. So this is in counter to electrons, which will have a negative charge. So essentially we're driving the electric current using the positive atoms, and then the electrons come through. So we start with an uncharged battery that has, it's composed of, one side is composed of a lithium manganese oxide. I'm not sure if my handwriting really passes here, but we'll say it does. And when we charge it, we're essentially pushing lithium ions through a separator that is that allows the lithium ions to pass through, but doesn't allow electrons to come back, and into carbon. So essentially we have a lithium ion, which is traveling across this battery, and it is intercalating into the carbon. And we have a lot of these going on. And so we have a positive charge accumulating, and to overcompensate for that, we just have electrons come through. So we have an electron coming to here and meeting a lithium atom. So essentially we neutralize the charge. This is the charging process. Now we have a phone charged 200% and we want to use it. So what we do is the exact reverse thing. The lithium that are inside the carbon want to travel back. So all of these lithium ions start traveling back and going back into the manganese oxide. And an electron has to come by and compensate for the electric charge. So the electron comes by and we get an electron moving through our devices, which basically powers whatever device we have. So that is really, in a very, very small nutshell, the essentials of it. I would describe like what is so hard with getting better batteries? Why is it such a difficult thing? Well, one thing is that there are many processes here going on, and they have to happen simultaneously. We have to have the lithium has to be able to travel from one end of the battery to the other and do it reliably, repeatedly, and preferably fast. So all of these, they kind of have to come one on top of the other. Like if we have a very fast ability to transfer lithium ions, then usually that would cause the separator to degrade fast. So you will have your phone charge very fast for say a year, and then it's dead. Most batteries survive for 400 cycles, more or less. So this is also a big challenge with getting cars, because when you want to have an electric car, you don't want to charge it for half an hour. You want to charge it for about the same amount of time you will do gasoline. Oh, I see I'm out of time. If you want to give me 3 more minutes, I will talk about challenges with getting batteries better.
Okay, so let's have a poll and let us vote. So I see here people are voting. 28 people, 29 people have voted, 30 people have voted, 31. That's about the number of people who typically vote. So it looks like everybody who wants to vote has probably voted by now. And I will end the poll and I will share the results. So thank you very much, Gabriel, and let us go ahead. Who is next? Who is next?
I think I'm next. But...
No, Anatoly is next. You're
sorry.
Jamie or Jaime? So Anatoly is next. Anatoly, are you there? All right, we'll give him 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, Jaime, please go ahead.
Right. So, anyone can hear
me? Oh, it's
me?
Anatoly. Sorry. Yes, go ahead, please, Anatoly.
Right. So I'm gonna. There's an old recreational mathematics problem that I encountered just recently that I really liked, and it brought me to the. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, please.
And it brought me to the issue of stochastic processes. So I'm going to give you a pause. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about it. Alice and Bob are playing a game where they throw a dice every second. Both throw a fair dice, and as soon as Alice sees 4, 5, 6 in a row, she stops. And as soon as Bob sees 6, 6, 6 in a row, he stops. Right. So it's a 4, 5, 6 versus 6, 6, 6 game. The question is, on average, if they play it many times, on average, which one will stop first? So just take 30 seconds and write, if you think it's 4, 5, 6, write 4, 5, 6 in the chat. If you think it's the same, write the same. If you think it's 6, 6, 6, write 6, 6, 6. And we'll wait just a little bit. Again, they just throw, and just look at the numbers. As soon as 4, 5, 6 comes up, Alice stops. As soon as 3, 6 comes up for Bob, he stops. Right. So there are different answers. Some people really feel for the number of the beast. Okay, so I'm going to give the right answer, which is that 4, 5, 6 will come up first by quite a lot. On average, it will take just 216 throws, which is 6 to the power of 3, for 4, 5, 6 to come up. But it will take 258 throws for 6, 6, 6 to come up. And I think it's pretty counterintuitive. And let me just, the best way I know to explain why it is intuitive after all is think about it like this. If you're Bob and you just threw a 6, like first in a triple that you need another 6 to continue successfully. But if you now threw a 5, you need to start all over again. You need another 6 to start. On the other hand, if you're Alice and you just threw a 4, you really want to see another 5. But now, suppose you don't get a 5, you might still get a 4, and then you kind of have a leg up. You can continue, you're already on the first step of your journey. You can continue to 5, 6. And so on average, because of your failures can still be a little bit enabling. You can finish a little bit earlier than Bob. So that's the intuitive explanation. I think it's kind of nice. The reason it's connected to stochastic processes is that the easiest ways to formalize this, probably the programmers amongst you are already thinking about it, is sort of a state machine concept, right? If we try to calculate, if we try to simulate what's going on, we just say, okay, there's a state. If I'm an Alice, if I'm like Alice as a program, and I just see numbers and I don't need to know where to stop. If I see 4, I'm in one state. If I see 4, 5, I'm in another state. If I haven't seen nothing yet, I'm in a 0 state. And then there's like a matrix of probabilities I can come up. If I'm in 4, what is the probability I'm going to the next state, to the first state? Or if I get another 4, I stay in the same state. And this set of probabilities is different for 4, 5, 6, and it's different for 6, 6, 6. But basically what I just described is a stochastic matrix. It's a matrix of probabilities for a random walk on a set of 3 states that Alice can be in, or different 3 states that Bob can be in. And you can use, you can use linear algebra, kind of straightforward, even in a naive sort of way, just writing down equations to calculate the expected number of throws until you get, yeah. My time is up. I do want to minutes. Yeah.
Would you like another 3 minutes?
I'd like them. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm doing this. I'm launching the poll, and everyone can vote. I'm voting in my alter ego here. Okay. So I see here people are voting, and that is probably about it. So end the poll, share the results. And Anatoly, please go ahead.
Right. So as Vanessa just wrote in chat, the keyword is Markov chain. This is you probably heard Markov chain as a buzzword before. This is a very simple but a pretty powerful example of it. The interesting thing is that the formalism of Markov chains is pretty simple. If you already know your basic probability and very basic linear algebra, you can go very quickly towards proving cool stuff, not just expecting number of throws for this problem, but other things. As another example, I'll give just the statements of a very famous theorem about random walks. So the random walk is, imagine a one-dimensional grid labeled with integers, minus infinity to 0, then the plus infinity. There's a drunk person standing at 0, and at every discrete time period, they either take a walk left or take the walk right with probability 50%. I think it should be pretty intuitive that with probability 1, they will return to 0 eventually. And this is in fact true. Now, in a two-dimensional random walk, you got a two-dimensional lattice with all the integer coordinates. And again, with random probability, they will choose either of the 4 directions to go. Here, it is still true that they will always, like always, with probability 1, return to the same spot. In 3 dimensions, this is no longer true. It's a cool fact that the Hungarian-born mathematician George Polya proved in the 1930s that there is 34% success probability of returning to the origin in 3 dimensions, and the probability goes down pretty quickly after that. But the interesting thing is that there is a slight twist on it, which is, imagine there are 2 people starting out. They both meet up, they both go out randomly. We can not only ask, will they meet again? We can also ask, will either one get to the place where the second one was already? So this is called like a scent property, right? Maybe I will not meet the second person, but I will at least get to where I can sense their scent. And it turns out another cool theorem is that it is still true in 3 and 4 dimensions that the 3 and 4 dimensional random walks still have the scent property, and you will still get like a little bit sadly to where they were. But after 5 dimensions, you're just lost. It's just, there's no hope for you. And the interesting thing I wanted to say is that all of these results are actually basically very simple. They require basic probability linear algebra. Look up one of the textbooks on this and just, go for it.
All right, well, thank you, Anatoly. And Gabriel, you're next. At some point I made a mistake. And so could you please go ahead?
Okay.
And actually, Gabriel, Patrick, before you start timing it, and Gabriel, before you start, I think that we should just have Gabriel speak and then break off into summarizing and figuring out feedback for a potential future meetup. We found in LessWrong Israel that usually after an hour and a half, we, no matter how much fun we're having, we break it off for just social chatting. And if it's going well, we can do this. We can do this a lot. So, so go ahead, please, Gabriel. Please speak.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I want to talk, I don't have such firm conclusions on the subject, but about a problem that's been bothering me a little bit. For attribution's sake, some of what I'm going to say are ideas I got from a book by Professor Peter Maskus called A Defense of Flogging. But the question that I wonder about goes more or less as follows. That if you take a poll of lots of people, and I've done this, I've gone around walking people and asking people this question, and ask them if they think that flogging or corporal punishment is cruel and unusual punishment. So overwhelmingly the answer you'll get is yes. Something that's intuitive. It's intuitive to the point that Antonin Scalia, in a very uncharacteristic statement once remarked that even though he knows the founding fathers would have thought flogging was legal, that if it came before him, he just wouldn't be able to rule it constitutional. It was just so obviously cruel. And yet on the other hand, if you ask lots and lots of people, if they were given the choice between receiving corporal punishment or some other similar penalty, or receiving a 5, 10, 15, 20-year prison sentence. So in nearly every case when I've asked someone, So the answer I've received is that they would considerably prefer to receive corporal punishment. And this is really, really strange intuitively, because if the goal of rules against cruel and unusual punishment is presumably for the benefit of the accused, for the benefit of the person being punished. So it's very strange to think that if people prefer flogging less, so then prefer flogging more, that it could possibly be considered more cruel or more unusual than prison. And since I don't have lots of time, so just to think about various options that come up on the subject. So as in one possibility people could say is that prisons are simply more effective, and therefore despite the fact that they're more cruel, so that justifies them anyway. But one, people don't say that. No one thinks prisons are cruel and unusual. Very few people currently think prisons are cruel and unusual punishment. And second, in any event, the evidence on that subject is very unclear. It's very hard to make a compelling case that there's anything close to overwhelming or even consensus evidence at this point that prison stays are effective at, or would be more effective than prior existing punishments at any of the goals they're trying to do. But they don't have much time, so I think that and yet people don't generally want to abolish prison, and certainly no one wants to abolish prison almost if they're told the alternative is flogging. I think that the most likely option here, since I'm short on time though, is, and this is something that I think extends over lots of similar tendencies and lots of similar preferences that people have when it comes to criminology and other punishment. It extends, I think, somewhat to the reason why we prefer lethal injection over other penalties. It extends possibly to other areas also, is that while prisons may be more cruel from the perspective of the accused, that punishing people via prison is something which inures and somewhat immune society from the punishment that they're inflicting on people. That when you punish someone, that when society punishes people by putting them in prison, so that's something that we can do and then we're done with it. And so therefore that's something which, as opposed to the strong distaste that we have both for having punishments that are done to people that we have to see. But I'm not sure. But I think that it's the same thing again by lethal injection, that much debate currently goes on about whether lethal injection is considered cruel and unusual or not. And yet everyone agrees that we could certainly find methods that from the sheer perspective of pain are less painful than lethal injection are.
Thank you. Would you like another 3 minutes, Gabriel?
What? Okay.
Would you like another 3 minutes? Okay, great. So let's vote. So I'm relaunching the poll, and everybody can vote, I think. Yes, you can vote now. Okay, so I see here 32 people have voted, 32, yeah, that's usually the number of people who vote. Good, so I'm going to end the poll, share the results. And Gabriel, yes, please go ahead, another 3 minutes.
Okay, so just, I guess, to respond to a few things I saw in the comments. So one, yes, from the perspective of guards, so imprisoning people can be greatly more traumatic, perhaps even than inflicting flogging. By prison now, I mean prison as it is practiced in the United States and as any version that is likely to be practiced in the United States. But still, society as a whole is largely not prison guards, and those people who are responsible for making decisions here are not prison guards, and they're not people who have to experience the consequences of inflicting such punishments. I think more broadly that if the goal of prison, to just go through some of the arguments I've often heard the other way, that if the goal of prison is supposed to be that it's rehabilitative, so then the idea that anyone can look at current evidence and see that prison is rehabilitative strikes me as odd. And certainly that it should create the strong reactions that are currently created in terms of one preference versus the other. If the role of prison is supposed to be superior because it prevents people from doing crime in the future, so then it seems strange that we inflict lengthy prison sentences on people for the types of crimes that are going to be very difficult or impossible to recommit or to commit a second time. It seems if And if the goal of prison is punishment, so then, again, you get stuck with the same problem of how could it possibly be the case that if given the choice between corporal punishment or pain or numerous other punishments in prison, people would choose the latter. How could it possibly be that a punishment we consider cruel and unusual is more preferable to a punishment which we inflict daily to numerous people? I don't know. I have more thoughts, but I think I'm just going to stop there.
All right, well, thank you. So now it's been an hour and a half, and I think it's always best to end with a taste for more, and your appetite is still up for more. I'm looking forward to hearing from the other people who volunteered, but I think it would be better to spend our time, and probably that means spending our time in the text chat, unless, I don't know, somebody has something particular they want to say, but let's try the text chat. Ideas for how to carry on. That would mean, does somebody want to organize another one of these? Basically, does somebody want to have a way of connecting to everybody who was in this call? Does anybody have any comments on what could have been done better?